I have spent 24 years of my life before retiring working for the Department of Corrections as a corrections officer. I know what goes on in a prison, having run a 168 inmate unit for 21 years of those 24 years I worked there. I thank God that I was able to retire 1 year early by buying back military time, allowing me to retire after 24 years, not 25. What I saw there in that environment, I now see around us in what was once a free society. We're becoming no different than inmates. We may not be in a 5x8 cell yet, but the walls are slowly closing in on us all, until one day we wake up to find that our world and its freedoms and liberties are gone. We find ourselves confined by movement, space, and time. Something I remember saying to inmates who would say there wasn't anything I could take from them because they're already in prison. I would say to them, in this environment, you do have something to lose. Your movement, space, and time. Meaning that if they screwed up, they could be charged, thus have their movement restricted even more, confining them to an even smaller cell, lockup, extending their time in prison, adding it to their present sentence. So I see these words coming to haunt me, as I see our movement being monitored more and more, restricting what we can or cannot do, giving you a feeling of doing time, and if you screw up, you'll be doing more time with less space and movement. Now, in the case of an inmate, the larger majority definitely did something to contribute to their situation. Yet in case of what is happening to society today, many have done nothing to warrant this kind of treatment. The biggest excuse today is to restrict us is because of this false idea of terrorists. I know that there are those who wouldn't be able to see this, not having worked in such an environment, to make this comparison. So let me share with you the comparison of that world and the world we now find ourselves coming into. Here's the comparison of these two worlds. Prison. You lose most of your rights upon incarceration. They may have not murdered someone, you're classed as if you did because it's you that have. To enter or leave the prison, you are searched and seen as a constant threat, to the point that this search is more than a pat-down. It's a total stripping of an individual, if needed, a cavity search. You are also searched within the institution, going to work, leaving work, entering a mess hall, leaving a mess hall. At random, you can be searched entering your housing unit or leaving it, entering your cell and leaving it. Because of your environment, you are constantly under suspicion, thus have no rights to object to being searched for the safety of the institution, be it your person or living quarters. Does this sound like headline news? What's happening to the average citizen? Now for society. You are losing a lot of your rights because of a few they call terrorists. You may have not committed such acts, but because you may be among some that are, you are considered this to have proven otherwise. Any small thing that you may or may not have done is blown out of proportion because of your environment. It's getting to where you are searched, coming and going to more and more areas of your experience, all in the name of your safety. Prison. There are two forms of charges that could be charged against you for institutional violations: on-the-spot charge and what's called a blue sheet charge. The on-the-spot charge were for minor infractions, whereas the blue sheet charge was for major infractions, which would go before an institutional court line system. No officer could enact sanctions off the blue sheet charges, only the court line officer. Even the on-the-spot charges still had to be read by a sergeant before being enacted by an officer. If these rules were not followed by any officer, they themselves would face charges of their court line system. Something we need for TSA today. Now, if corruption entered this system, the system would break down. The ones who suffer the most with this corruption of correctional staff are the inmates. Today, it is the general public. To ensure this doesn't happen, an internal affairs department was in place to investigate inmate allegations of such a thing going on. There were always policing the police, going as far as the State Department head, if needed, involving the court system, cleaning on up to the Supreme Court if needed. Checks and balances all the way to the top. To keep these in line were also outside systems like ombudsmen and ACLU, etc. Yet, even with this in place, corruption still found a way to corrupt the total checks and balances, believe it or not. Now in society, the system of laws and law enforcement are so placed today that all the checks and balances are there. Yet we're slowly seeing these checks and balances corrupted. We're seeing it reverse to where it works from the top down, when the leaders themselves are corrupt, and it isn't long that those under them follow suit. This corruption is spreading like a virus being transmitted by breathing, in other words, speaking lies. It becomes like dust, and the dust of this death is touching everything. If you attempt to stop it in society, you get the same thing we got working for the Department of Corrections many times. Isolation, called an inmate lover, lover of the little people, traitor, following the unwritten rule, a blue line that separates you from the criminal, right or wrong. If you stood for the truth for either officer or inmate, you were shot down as not with it. Doctoring reports was encouraged to fit the need, according to many times overbearing staff who didn't want to stir the status quo. So many more comparisons could be made without question. But then it begins to touch the well-being of your own family and threats that were hinted at, that if you ever leak these conditions out, you could forget your pensions. You could be set up so you would regret ever blowing the whistle. And the blowing whistleblowers today, you knew this and saw it happen from time to time of those who attempted to expose it all. Most of these saw the expensive legal battles and corruption, loss of evidence involved in the case, so ended up quitting the job, moving on to another career. It was sad to see. This in a prison system. It's even sadder to see this happening in our nation and worldwide. May God help us all.